I am not afraid of earthquakes. I'm not afraid of tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes, whatever. So I'm going to tell you, walk that line, climb in that ring, and face me face to face.
All right, hey there, all you savages. Welcome back to Scum Nation and WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. My name is Steve, and with me is the Scum this week, Rugged Ronnie Garvin, Scum.
Yeah, Steve, always a pleasure. As I like to say each and every week here on WGD Weekly, to be back here with you, my longtime tag team partner. Always a pleasure to be doing business with the Class Act. That's the boys over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. And today it'll be a pleasure to be doing business with one of my childhood favorites. We've spoken throughout season one with some of the guests that we've had, and always seems like the both of us like to go back to those days at Georgia Championship Wrestling. The man that Gordon Soley dubbed the Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin, will be with us today, Steve. Really excited I don't know of many interviews with Ronnie that are out there, so I'll be interested to hear his take on a lot of the stuff. The man is a former NWA World Champion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting. He's one of the guys that you would not want to go up to and ask him if wrestling was fake, because he'd probably knock you on your ass. He's not that tall in size, but he was one tough son of a gun, tough as nails, and Hands of Stone was a great name for him. So Ronnie Garvin going to be on the show here in just a little while. Got a lot of things to talk about this week, Scum. It's Royal Rumble week, so that's pretty cool. And a couple of headlines I wanted to talk about just kind of in relation to the world of pro wrestling. Kind of in the mainstream. Not a huge week for classic pro wrestling, so to speak, but we got a couple of topics here for headlines. We got JR, good old JR, joining Fox Sports, so that's pretty interesting. I wonder what he's going to be doing there, man.
Sure. Yeah, I actually had a chance to read the article that he wrote on his classic favorite Royal Rumble moments for Fox Sports, and that's a great fit, I think. I mean, I know that, you know, as wrestling fans, we were spoiled to have his great commentary over the years in numerous different companies, probably most famously, at least to the modern fan, is, you know, alongside Jerry the King Lawler on Monday Night Raw. But you can't dispute that JR, anyone who's familiar with him, you know, huge football fan, you know, obviously the Sooners, his home state of Oklahoma, it's synonymous. I mean, when he would come to the ring, it was to the team, the school march there. So I think that JR will be a great fit at Fox Sports. I don't know exactly what they'll have him doing, but one can only imagine, and the possibilities are endless.
Yeah,
Steve.
He is a huge football fan, like you mentioned, Scum, and a Steelers fan, too, just like myself. So I know he has great taste in football, and he has a lot of background. He was actually on Steve Austin's podcast not too long ago, and if you haven't listened to his podcast, that's some great stuff there. So definitely check out Steve Austin's podcast. But one of the guests was JR, and he was talking about how he got kind of dogged out by the coach when he was playing football back in high school, and he went home and told his dad about it, and his dad beat his ass. So it was kind of a trial by fire in the world of football for JR at an early age, and it's something that he stuck with. And like you mentioned, a huge Oklahoma fan. He was on the sidelines as recently as this past Sugar Bowl, or what was it? Yeah, it was a Sugar Bowl? Well, where they Oklahoma upset Alabama. Some wouldn't call it an upset, but either way, they beat Alabama in a huge BCS game this year. And JR was on the sidelines there going nuts. So it's always great to see him involved in the world of sport, and we wish him well here at WGD Weekly. But also something I wanted to talk about super quick. We have crazy opinions on this, but Richard Sherman, after the Seattle-San Francisco game, cut what seemed to be a wrestling style promo. So I wonder if he's a fan, Scum.
Could be. Before we moved on from good old JR, I wanted to ask, when you were talking about that instance where he went and told his father about what happened with the high school football coach. Now, I wonder if an early JR, maybe, you know, the inner broadcaster in him shine, when his old man was whooping his ass, if he, you know, had any of those comments along the lines of the Ross living room looked like a 2 a.m. at last call on Main Street, Muskogee, or possibly that his old man took him out back to the woodshed, stomped a mud hole in him, and walked it dry.
Yeah, I don't think he used that, but taking him out behind the woodshed, I believe, was involved in that story. So that's actually funny that you mentioned that. But check it out. It's on Steve Austin's podcast. You can hear it. I think it's a two-parter. I'm pretty sure it's a two-parter with JR. Either way, it's some really good stuff there. I'd love to have him on our show, but now that he's signed on with Fox Sports, he's probably going to be busier than ever. And I know it was always tough trying to get anybody that was signed with WWE. So as soon as he was released there, I thought there would be hope that maybe we could get him on our show, Scum.
Well, you never know. You can always try. We'll see what we can do to get good old JR on the program. That would be a hell of a broadcast, that's for sure. Moving along to, you were speaking about the Sherman and after the Seahawks 49ers game and that promo that he caught on Crabtree and everybody else. Again, we were talking about this a little bit, and of course it buzzed all over because somebody makes remarks like that and everybody just jumps all over. Personally, like I was telling you off the air here, Steve, I think it was just a case of a guy who was caught up making a big play, big moment, and then instead of coming forth with "I'm excited, we're going to the Super Bowl and we just won the game because of the interception I have," what came out of his mouth was a little different than that. So I don't think that the guy really had any ill intent other than to say, "I'm the man, I just made this play and I'm excited to be going to the championship game."
Yeah, that was pretty crazy that he said all that stuff. But apparently there is a little backstory there. Last year at a party, he actually had a run-in with Michael Crabtree, and they had words there. So there's some bad blood there between the two. But either way, he cut a great promo. And I really don't have a dog in the fight. Like I said, I'm a Steelers fan, so my team's sitting at home this year counting our Super Bowl rings, which we beat Seattle in one Super Bowl. So either way,
Little known fact on that one. Funny you would use the term run-in because when Sherman and Crabtree had that run-in, there was an actual wrestling run-in as Arn Anderson blindsided both of them with a tire iron across the knee.
Or that spine buster.
I believe the run-in was not at a party, as you said, but it was at a random gas station.
Of course. Oh, boy. Arn Anderson, great stuff. But, dude, it's Royal Rumble week, man. So many things to talk about when you're talking about the Royal Rumble. And we'll talk a lot about that after Ronnie Garvin. But we got him coming up here real quick. WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Thanks for listening. And thank you guys for a ton of subscriptions here recently. Our interview with Jim Cornette, dude, that thing went through the roof really quick. So thank you guys very much for listening and watching our show on YouTube.
Absolutely. Thanks to the WGD faithful, to Scum Nation out there. We'll keep trying to bring you the best guests and the best product that we can. You do us a favor. You keep tuning in and making it the success that it's snowballed into here. Getting back to our guest tonight and, kind of playing in one of his biggest matches in his short run with WWF was against Greg the Hammer Valentine in that feud that he had. One of the only major programs he worked when he was in WWF was a classic match at the Royal Rumble. They had that submission match where Garvin used a variation of the Scorpion Deathlock sharpshooter at the time, and Valentine obviously was the figure 4 leg lock. And they both had the shin guards. And Garvin would refer to his as the hammer jammer, and I remember Valentine putting him in the figure 4, and Garvin was making faces and sticking his tongue out at him, and eventually Ronnie did get the win in that. And two classic performers. It was a good feud, and they culminated in a good match there at the Royal Rumble. So kind of ties in, Ronnie being Rumble Week. Good to have him on here. I know he's most known for his time in the NWA and Crockett Promotions in Georgia, like we had said. But he had a Rumble moment. And again, I'm hoping for this interview to be a classic walk down memory lane like we always have with a guy who you don't really hear that much from these days, Steve. And hopefully it's not too good, though, because I think I would get a little bit scared if I saw Garvin get excited in the nature that Jake Roberts talked about when they used to beat the hell out of each other when he was on the program. Because I'm a fan of Ronnie, but I'm not really sure that I'm that big of a fan that I would want to see what was going through his mind with that type of arousal.
Well, I got to say that I agree with you there 100%. Good stuff. Ronnie Garvin coming right up. Royal Rumble talk after that. Scum, anything to add before we go to our interview, man?
No, I'm looking forward to getting on the lines with the Hands of Stone.
All right, and I wanted to add this. You are a fountain of information as opposed to being a fountain of misinformation. some of the stuff you come up with, dude. That feud, I totally forgot about it. But as I'm thinking about it, when you were talking about the shin guards and then Ronnie Garvin making those faces at him when he was in the figure four, it actually came back to me. So that's awesome. The fountain of information, the Scum. That may be your new calling card when I introduce you every week.
Lord knows I've been called worse, my friend. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we're going to get you right over to Ronnie Garvin right after this.
Hello, this is Johnny B. Bad. I'm the bad man of World Championship Wrestling, and you are listening to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. And let me tell you, the Scum is no bum. I'm going to kick his booty with my tutti frutti. It's going to be a blessing to teach you a lesson. Listen to the show, or I'm going to get you.
All right, all you savages, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. We got rugged Ronnie Garvin with us, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Been all over the world, all over the territories. Ronnie, thanks for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
That is awesome. Thanks again. We just wanted to run through a timeline of your career like we do here at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. So let's go back to the beginning, if we could, Ronnie, and tell us how you got interested and how you entered the wrestling business.
To the beginning. You want to go back to the 20s?
Absolutely.
What got me interested in wrestling? Well, I played hockey, and I was in sports, but hockey was real hard to be one of the top guys because everybody in Canada played hockey. So I was looking for something that, and I like wrestling. I wrestled amateur, and I got a chance to go to Boston, start with Tony Santos, and that's when I realized, well, maybe a career in wrestling would be more lucrative. And I can't complain. I did very well, and if I would have been in hockey, I don't think it would have turned out the same way.
Well, it's good for us that you made the right career choice, that's for sure. And, my partner, the Scum over here, was quite the hockey player back in the day, too. But surely it is very difficult to get into hockey on a professional level and make any sort of good income off that. So good to know that you stuck with wrestling. And for us fans, it was great to watch your career. But either way, moving on, we were going to talk about next in line was working with Terry Garvin. And, of course, down the line, working with Jimmy Garvin. So give us a little bit of a backstory as to how you got teamed up with Terry and how both of those guys took your last name of Garvin.
Well, I started with Terry. Terry was raised probably about maybe a mile from where I was raised. And I knew him. I knew Pat Patterson. I knew a lot of guys in Montreal. And Pat Curry is the one that was doing the training. And so Terry and I went on the road. Terry came back from England, and him and I teamed up, and we went south. And then later on in my life, I got married, and Jimmy was my stepson. Of course, when I married his mom, he was 12 or 13 years old then. And then later on, we teamed up, but not very long, I think, just a couple of years. Most of my career, I was a single wrestler. I teamed up with Terry probably for 3 or 4 years, 3 years maybe, 3, maybe 4. And then he kind of went on his way, and then teamed up with Jimmy way down the road. A little bit in 74, and then that was back in, I guess, in the 80s. But my life in wrestling, it was strictly a business. I treated every aspect of my life was business. And wherever the money was, that's where I went. And that's why I stayed mainly in the South, because I really liked the South. I didn't like being in the North and all that traveling, and like territories like Minnesota and the New York area and all that. I didn't go to New York till the last 2 years of my career. And I still didn't like New York. I just don't like traffic in big cities. Give me some woods and national forests and a lot of hunting and fishing, and I'm a happy guy.
Yeah, that's interesting. The Scum was telling me when he was trying to contact you to be on our show, he caught you hunting one day and fishing the next. So interesting stuff there. But moving on, you were talking about moving south and working in some of the territories. And I know that you touched base in several states, in Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee. You worked with Randy Poffo's organization, ICW, International Championship Wrestling. Tell us a little bit about your stop there, working with Randy Savage. What was it like working with him inside of the ring and out?
Well, maybe a lot of people don't know that, but I own 20% of that promotion. So, again, it was a business deal. And I wrestled Savage. I wrestled his brother. I wrestled Bob Roode. Bob Orton were there. We had a good crew, and the whole idea behind it was to make money and put people in the building. And we eventually went out of business because it was mismanaged. And WCW, we eventually all left. Because promotion is totally different than wrestling. And there's a lot of wrestlers made the mistake of going into promotion and not knowing anything about promotion. Because you're a wrestler doesn't mean you know how to promote. It's just like a promoter. It doesn't know how to wrestle. So we were in the wrong business, and it was not a good experience, really. WCW was a rude awakening for me. It started when we split up in Knoxville, the Fulton promotion, Southeastern promotion, and then we all hooked up with the Poffos and tried to salvage the promotion, and eventually it collapsed. But we all make mistakes in life. I took it as a mistake.
Sure. Well, yeah, everybody makes a mistake here and there, and you just learn from them. Moving right along here chronologically with your career. While you were in those territories there down south, you went through a few of them for sure. You know, you're in Kentucky, spent some time in Alabama. For a while, at least at times, you had worked at that point in time with the great Andre the Giant. Several of our guests that we've had recently have always seemed to have some colorful memories of the Giant, and we were just wondering if you could share your memories of working with Andre, maybe if you had a colorful story or two that you cared to share about that time with Andre.
Well, it was just a one-night thing. It was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I think it was somewhere around 78, 77, 78, I believe. And that's when Andre was in good shape. And I knew Andre. He spoke French, and I could speak French to him. But like I say, that was just a one encounter. It was one night. And of all the guys, and I don't know if anybody's got records of it, but I do, I wrestled Andre the Giant in a handicap match. It was him and Roy Lee Welch against me. And I don't know if you knew that. But it was booked as a handicap. But what happened is I had broken Roy Lee Welch's hand. And he got me by surprise. He said, I'll get a partner. So I said, you bring all the partners you want. Of course, I didn't know it was going to be Andre. Well, I knew, but I wasn't supposed to know. So when Andre showed up, of course, I was kind of upset, but it was booked as a handicap. Roy Lee Welch and Andre the Giant against Ronnie Garvin.
Very, very interesting.
And usually it was Andre always wrestled 2 or 3 guys.
Right. That's what I was just going to say. Sure. Interesting.
Roy Lee Welch couldn't wrestle. He was on the apron of the ring, but he was actually booked as a partner. You know, he had a broken hand. It was kind of interesting, and it drew. I mean, what the hell? I think this Coliseum in Knoxville was sold out. And I remember down the road about 5, 6, 7 years later, I went on Bourbon Street with Andre and Frank Valois, the guy that was traveling with him. He had a guy travel with him. You ever heard of Frank Valois?
I don't believe I have. No.
Yeah, he traveled with him, and we went on Bourbon Street, and of course Andre could drink. He drank like 100 beers in a couple of hours. It was incredible.
Yeah, as legend would have it, we've heard certainly some stories of Andre's tolerance, let's say.
Andre was a gentleman. He was a real good guy.
Very good, very good. We've heard that a lot, too. Well, we'll keep moving along here from that time in Tennessee to moving on in your career where a lot of people on a national level sort of became more familiar with you when you touched down in Georgia Championship Wrestling and you guys were on the Superstation, TBS. Personally, when I was younger, one of the first programs that I remember watching was on the Superstation, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and your moniker there was the Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin. I was just wondering, where did the Hands of Stone name come from? Like, did you come up with that, or was there a reason behind that someone had come to you with that name?
No, well, before that, prior to that, I was in Knoxville, and I was the one-man gang in Knoxville. And that was probably 6-7 years earlier, 4 or 5 years earlier. And then when I went to Georgia, well, I was knocking out guys, and Gordon Soley's the one that came out with that. Gordon Soley started that, and it just stuck with me. Gordon Soley was good for stuff like that. He would come out with names for different holes, but Gordon Soley is the reason of the Hands of Stone.
Very good. Yeah, I remember Gordon Soley, probably my favorite announcer of all time. He was good for stuff like that.
I think he was the best of them all. I think. That's my opinion.
When I hear the Hands of Stone, I think of Gordon Soley saying it, calling your matches there, so that makes perfect sense. And speaking of calling your matches there, one of our most recent guests that we had was Jake the Snake Roberts, and I was telling him the same thing I'm telling you. One of my favorite, what I thought was one of the most believable feuds of all time, was when you and Jake were battling over the television title down there in Georgia, and he had nothing but great memories of that and the work that you guys did together. So we were hoping that you could kind of go back and give us some of your thoughts and memories of working that classic feud with Jake.
Oh, Jake was probably one of the best. I think he was underrated in a lot of ways. What a fantastic worker. A guy could wrestle, could do about anything. And I made money with him, and to me the bottom line was making money. There was so many. Jake the Snake comes to mind, and then another guy that you never hear about is the great Malenko. And I wrestled guys like that. That to me, that was a lot of people say, "Oh, you wrestle Ric Flair." To me, that was nothing. He's just an average guy. He had the same matches for 30 years. But wrestling guys like Jake the Snake, I mean, you never knew he would come up with stuff, and just great talent. And a great guy. Great guy. I always got along real good with Jake. As a matter of fact, I talked to him 3 or 4 years ago. He called me right out of the blue. Yeah, we've had strap matches, chain matches. I forgot. It was unreal. Everywhere we went, it was a great crowd. And that was for the early 80s, I think, 81, 82, 83.
Yes, absolutely. That was right after Jake had come from Mid-South Wrestling. There are some great programs in Georgia. You move up to the Carolinas to go to work for the Crockett Promotions, and you work a program with Tully Blanchard, some good stuff there. Teaming up with Barry Windham, you win the U.S. tag titles, feuding with guys like the Kolovs and Crusher Khrushchevs of the world. Tell us a little bit about what it was like moving up from Georgia to the Carolinas, and what was it like working with some of the guys that were there? There's some really big names there.
Barry is a great guy. Great guy. He used to fly with me a lot. He liked flying. And we teamed up for a while, and yeah, I remember the good matches with Tully Blanchard. We had tape fist matches, and the Kolovs. Kolovs were real good heels. You make a lot of money when you work with guys like that. That's talent. People ask me about wrestling. I says wrestling is like dancing. If you got a guy that don't know how to wrestle, your matches are shits. And if you got somebody that don't know how to dance, your dance is going to be terrible. You know, wrestling is the same as having a partner that when you dance with. If you don't cooperate, don't have a good match. There was some guys in wrestling that you might as well wrestle a chair. And there was other guys, like it was such a pleasure to wrestle, because then you had to wrestle. Jake the Snake, the Kolovs, what was his name? Dick Murdoch, guys like that. It was just. It was actually enjoyable because you could have a match that was believable, with talent, and people enjoyed it. It was good entertainment. And compared to what I see today, I don't know what they call it, but that's not entertainment.
Well, while we're on the subject of some of the guys from that territory that were great workers and pretty funny individuals themselves, we always try to get a good story in, like we did earlier about Andre the Giant. We always try to get a good story in about Dick Murdoch, too. He's one of our favorites on the show. So if you could, give us a good Dick Murdoch story.
Oh, Dick, you just never knew what he was going to do. I remember the first time I ran into him was in Florida, and him and Dusty Rhodes were partners. And we had a 6-man tag team. And I was always a serious guy. I never laugh in the ring or never. And in the sixth man, him and Dusty Rhodes are doing things that I had to step down off the ring, and I had my face buried in the apron. I was laughing so hard. I mean, it was just incredible, the stuff they were doing. And I couldn't keep a straight face. Oh, they do crisscross and do all kinds of signs, and it was like the cartoon hour. And people enjoyed it. Everybody was cracking up.
That is great. Yet another Dick Murdoch story in the books here at WGD Weekly. But let's talk about a feud you had with Jim Cornette, one of our guests in the Midnight Express. You teamed up with the Boogie Woogie Man, who also made a stop on our show. He was one heck of a guy. You guys teamed up, and it was the birth of one crazy character called Miss Atlanta Lively. So, Ronnie, from your perspective, tell us a little bit about Miss Atlanta Lively.
To tell you the truth, I don't remember I remember the Miss Atlanta Lively, and I remember when I went shopping to buy the clothing and the makeup, and but I don't remember how it started. The very beginning of it. I know there was Big Mama, which was his manager, and I can't remember all the details, but I remember I had a great time. Getting dressed as a woman was something. I even went out dressed up like that in a nightclub. and I had a girlfriend at the time, and we were dancing together, and people thought we were lesbians. I think I got dressed as a woman about 7 or 8 different times. We did it in different cities, and I think it was a pay-per-view, if I remember right. I'm not sure. It was the first time was in Atlanta itself, at the Omni.
Yeah, I remember the one was Starcade with the street fight with the Midnight Express.
That's it. Starcade. Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke recently with Jimmy Valiant, and he was getting a good laugh telling us about that. You guys, that match with the Midnights and Miss Atlanta Lively and everything. He certainly enjoyed that. He enjoyed that time a lot from what he relayed to us.
Well, it was anything to make money.
Sure.
It was good. It was a good angle. People liked it.
Absolutely. I can speak for Steve and myself watching and being big fans at that time. We certainly enjoyed it. I'll always, like you said, it's a money maker, but it's certainly entertaining as well, touching back on what you were saying a few minutes back. And again, moving along here, touching on another name that you mentioned, not necessarily too fondly from what you said. In the fall of 1987, a big moment for you, at least in your career, was you defeated Ric Flair and became NWA World Champion. Without question, an honor for anybody in the wrestling business. So take us through how it was brought about and presented to you, the possibility to become world champion with Flair. And if you would, and I always was kind of confused by this because I was always a big fan of your work and was excited as a fan when you had that victory over Flair. It seemed like afterwards they didn't really do much. I mean, they didn't really have you fighting. Like, I thought that it would have been interesting to see you defend the title a lot leading up to the rematch with Flair, but it didn't seem like they had you really go with anybody until the rematch. So if you could bring us to how that first came about, how you were presented with the opportunity to become champion, and then if you had any thoughts on why maybe they waited to have you wait for that rematch.
Well, that was politics, and that's why I left after that. It was strictly politics. Dusty Rhodes was the booker, and he was against it. And what are you going to do? He didn't book me anywhere during the whole time I had the belt until the rematch, because Dusty Rhodes was a very, very jealous guy when it came to guys getting over. And he was the wrong guy to be a booker. He's the one that put Jim Crockett out of business. He's the reason Jim Crockett had to sell and was losing his butt. What are you going to do? He was the same thing with the Rock and Roll Express. He couldn't stand the Rock and Roll Express getting over like rock stars. I mean, girls would go crazy. They had to have some protections for the Rock and Roll Express. The girls would attack them just like rock stars. It was unbelievable. So Dusty Rhodes had to book himself with them, a 6-man tag team. So the whole thing was politics, but I didn't care. You know, when enough was enough, I made money. And after the return, the belt went back to Flair, and I was gone. Short time after that. I didn't put up with that. I didn't put up with that stuff. To me, the glory and being a star, people say stars are in the sky. There's no such thing as a stars on the planet here. You know, this is Hollywood bullshit as far as I'm concerned. And because I put my pants one leg at a time, I'm just like the average Joe. And that's why I never liked the limelight. I never liked people think you're something special. Nobody's special. But there was some wrestlers, they thought they were big time, whatever. I don't know. It goes to their head. You know, they become, they're better than everybody else. I always kept both feet on the ground. And it was a business and to make money and one day retire. And the business was not used for me to go out and party every night, get into drugs, have a bunch of women, go on TV and brag about how many women you slept with, how much drinking you did, how much drugs you did. It wasn't my life. I went to bed early, I got to the gym, worked out, and did my job. And so anyway, when I was a world champion, it was big-time politics. And I just don't play politics. I don't play politics. I refuse to do it.
Right.
So, you know, people think it was a great moment. Yeah, it was okay. But I had a whole lot better matches and better memories than being the world champion. The world champion was probably the biggest paycheck, but, you know, so what? I mean, you know, like I said, it's politics and it's not driven by talent. It's driven by politics. There was a lot of guys that would have made good world champions. Jake the Snake Roberts. Ted DiBiase. I know a bunch of guys. But a lot of guys didn't want to travel. They don't want to be on the road because, you know, they weren't in bars every night drinking either, you know. And, you know, there was a lot of guys that liked to be homebody. You know, they didn't want to be in California one night, in New York another night, and go to Japan, and then be in Puerto Rico another night. And I mean, it's a hard life. You know, sure. And then they found a guy in Ric Flair that, you know, didn't want to be home. He wanted to be all over the planet. So, you know,
right.
They let him have it. You know, that's basically what the world champion was. He was all over the place. So if you didn't want to see your house, just become the world champion. So you never knew where you lived.
Very
and that part, I wouldn't have had it if, you know, there's no way I could have been a world champion for a year. No way. A month, 2 months, fine. You know, that's fine. But like I say, we're all different, you know. And to me, money is important, but sometimes, you know, your private life is important too.
Well, much like you were saying, you know, your character on screen, in the ring, you certainly always came across as a blue collar, a no nonsense kind of wrestler that was just thinking at that time with some of the other names that were there that didn't get a chance, that were the bad guys or the heels while Flair was the champion. Just seemed like it would have made sense at that time given, you know, your talent and some of those guys like we talked about, like a Blanchard or maybe Arn Anderson or even
Murdoch. There was a good guy there. Arn Anderson. There was another guy. There's so many of them. You know, you mentioned names. Arn Anderson. What a match you had with a guy like that. I mean, one of the best. You know, and Tully and guys like that. I mean, there's just it was actually a pleasure to get in the ring and wrestle. You know, it's just like playing any game that. Say you're playing tennis, you don't want to play with somebody you can beat. 6 games straight and no competition. You want to play with somebody that you enjoy. You know, beaten and you get beat by, and you beat each. You know, that is just as good as you. You know, that's the whole thing. But it's funny, when you sit down and you talk to the guys, you pop up with names, you know, that don't come to your mind, you know. Ole Anderson was another good one, and Gene Anderson. I remember wrestling them. I was even partners with Ole Anderson at one time in Florida. in the early 70s.
Yeah, all of those guys, definitely great workers and definitely fondly remembered at our site on Wrestling's Glory Days and by legions of fans all over the place that, much like you, we aren't necessarily the biggest fans of the current product, or as you said, whatever you would call it, but we certainly remember those days and those names, yourself included. So moving along, in that next year, the Great American Bash would be an eventful series for you, as you were involved in a really unique match that we talked about on the show not too long ago. It was the Tower of Doom with you and Jimmy and the Road Warriors and Dr. Death Steve Williams against the Varsity Club and the Russians and Al Perez. And I think that was the only time that a match like that ever took place. So looking back at that, what do you remember about that unique setup and that huge tower cage? And
that's one match that I was glad there was only one, because I would have never got into another one. That was crazy. It was dangerous. I mean, I didn't like it. Once I got up there, and I said, "What am I doing here?" Right. And I think there was other guys that felt the same way.
Sure, sure.
It was pretty dangerous with all that weight up there and all the, somebody could have got hurt bad. No, that's one that I did not like. I thought it was the craziest idea in the world. I think the Midnight Express were in that one, weren't they? No, I can't remember. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I believe it was.
No. I remember there was a scaffold match with the Rock and Roll Express. That was crazy too.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about. I never was a high flyer. The only flying I did was in airplanes. I never was too crazy about height.
Sure.
Like what's his name used to do. The Samoan, what's his name? You did that dive off the top.
Superfly.
What a move! Superfly snooker. God, what a move that was. That was unbelievable.
Yeah, he was pretty exciting then. It seems like everybody these days is jumping around and coming from the, heights and a high flyer. That's, back in the day, like you were saying, when the Superfly had come off, it was something really special.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it was different. Mm-hmm. But I was brought up when I started wrestling. You just both feet on the ground, and you wrestle. There was not a whole lot of aerobatics, acrobatics, whatever you want to call it, and flying off the top ropes and stuff like that. There was a little bit, but not. And it seems like the business progressed, and it got more and more and more. But in my days, there was not a whole lot of flying around.
Sure. Well, later on in that same series with the Great American Bash, after being a crowd favorite, a good guy, so to speak, for a while, they had the move where you kind of were reunited with Barry Windham, but this time when you had turned on Dusty Rhodes, you had Gary Hart as your manager for a bit. Did you have a preference? Did you enjoy maybe working more as a fan favorite or as a heel, as they say, and what do you remember about that in that?
Well, I was a heel all my career till the end. The last 10 years, I was a heel all my life. I was in Knoxville and a lot of places. I didn't care. I was me, and and it's real easy. People say, "Oh, you're a bad guy." Well, if I would have wrestled, I could have been a good guy, and if I would have wrestled against Hulk Hogan, I would have been a bad guy. Because the guy was liked a whole lot more, and that's basically what to me it didn't matter. And the thing about Dusty Rhodes wanted to wrestle me, and he thought he could beat me because he was jealous. I had wrestled all the Four Horsemen, and I had beaten Ric Flair, and he couldn't stand it. He couldn't sleep at night. I know that, and so he figured if he'd turn, if he'd turn me heel, then he'd wrestle me, and then he'd get himself over. And then he even gave me a partner and a manager. So he could beat the manager, he could beat my partner, and he could beat me. And then he would, that's just an ego thing, So I left. I knocked him out and I was gone. He laid in the ring in Baltimore, Maryland. He never put his hands on me. I was gone. Goodbye. You know, that's what happens. And he went on TV on top of that and said that he beat me up in the bar. Well, he never had a tape of that. It never happened. But, you know, that was it. I never wrestled him.
That's fun.
See, what happened is they set up a deal where Gary Hart had put a bounty on Dusty Rhodes, and he wanted to turn me heel in Baltimore. In that town I was over, I had won 2 titles there, and you know, I was big babyface in that town, big, and so he wanted to do it there. And when I did knock him out, half of the crowds cheered anyway. But that was the end of it. I was gone. I got on, and the way I quit was very simple. We were going somewhere with Crockett had jets and had 2 airplanes, and I got on the airplane. I shook hands with everybody, and they didn't know that. Well, the guys, I remember the Rock and Roll Express. I can't remember. There was probably 8 or 10 guys on the airplane. I shook hands with them. I said, "I'll see you guys. I don't know where, but I'll see you guys down the road somewhere." They thought I was joking. I walked off the plane with my bag, and I went home.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's how I quit. I never did take any bullshit in wrestling from anybody. Promoters, anybody. You know, and that's the way I live my life. I respect people. They don't respect me and kiss my roll. You know.
That's
the way I operated. And I had a lot of respect for a lot of guys. And, you know, and it's like any other business. There's always a few around that don't deserve respect because they don't command respect. But on the whole, I would do my life all over the same again. I had a great time, met a lot of good guys that I still keep in touch with. Not too many of them, but some of them. That's why I like to go to reunions. You run into a lot of guys you haven't seen in years. There's wrestling reunions, you know, like the one in Alabama. I'll be going in March. And I went to the one in Vegas. And it's great. You run into some guys that just you hadn't seen 30, 35 years. You know, because you don't keep in touch. But it was a good life, good career. For me anyway. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, you make a very good point. I can really empathize with what you're saying about going to the reunion and seeing people that you haven't worked with in years. Myself and the Scum just went to a show very recently, and it was cool to see not only all the characters that we idolized growing up as kids, but also watching the interaction between some of the old school wrestlers running into each other, maybe for the first time in a long time, like you said. You mentioned earlier, Ronnie, that you didn't like the long travel that the Minnesota territory gave to you, but you ended up there anyway for a short period of time, and you worked a smaller program with Greg Gagne. Tell us a little bit about what it was like working for the AWA. It seemed like it was kind of a fit for you as far as your wrestling style goes, but the stop there was pretty short. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think I only had 1 or 2 matches with him, if I remember right. I just didn't fit there either. I was thinking to quit completely. You know, I've been in the business at that time probably 28 years, and I was thinking of quitting, and I was going to Puerto Rico. I had a better deal in Puerto Rico also. Then I wound up in New York for 2 years, and then I told Vince, I said, I can't sing, I can't dance, and I can't rock and roll. I can wrestle, but that's it. I don't fit here. You know, if you can sing, dance, and rock and roll, you got it made. So, you know, time for me to do an exit. Well, you know, you got to know when to quit. You know, you stay in the business till you're 60 years old. You look like an imbecile. First of all, you know you're broke. You know, and you become an has-been. You know, and that's what I hate to see. You know, guys are in the ring and they're 60 years old. I mean, come on. You know, I know it's not real, but your body, you look like an old douchebag. You know, your skin is sagging. You know, the older you get, the more you look like a pear. And, you know, you might go as a human pear and make some money. I don't know. Might be a good angle. But you know, so I was 45 years old, and I said goodbye. Time to go.
So in reality, right from the beginning, your stay in the World Wrestling Federation, in your view, was probably going to be a short-lived one?
I've always liked Vince. Vince is a very honest guy, but I didn't fit there. You know, I mean, you got to be realistic. You know, it was not my kind of wrestling. It was not my kind of, you know, like I say, I mean, it's a lot of bullshit, and you got to be able to sing, dance, and I'm not an entertainer like that. I go in the ring and I wrestle, you know, and I put on a fight, you know, and try to make it as believable as I can. And instead of going around and you know, dressed up like a clown or have polka dots, I love that one. When Vince put polka dots on the Fat Man, I love that. I thought it was great. You know, and but Vince is a genius. Put polka dot on the Fat Man. But no, I just didn't fit in an environment. I had a good time. 2 years, I had a good time. I made some money, and the only reason I made money is because I thought about that referee gimmick. You had to make money, you got to be into the pay-per-views. You got to be involved. And there's so much going on in New York, and there was so much stuff going on that how do you even stand out, you know? So by doing that, me and Greg, you know, I wrestled him and I lost the match, and I came back as a referee, which, you know, was something different. Then I was hounding him, you know. I was giving him a lot of problems. And I made money. I got in on the pay-per-views, and I was in WrestleMania. And because otherwise, if you don't have anything going, you're not going to be on those shows, you know.
Absolutely.
But after 2 years, I had enough, and I left in good terms. And, you know, I left in better terms than I did with Crockett. I didn't quit. I gave him a notice, and, you know, and I said, I'm leaving, you know, and it was time to go. Then I went into aviation, and I flew cargo for 13 years, and I had the best of both worlds. You know, I had a good 13 years of flying. I had a great time, and well, everything turned out pretty good. Can't complain.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's good to know when to get out and, you know, do things the right way, like you said, you know, so you're not, you know, in your later years, like you said, in the 60s, and some of the guys are still out there, you know, getting in the ring and things like that. But I wanted to touch on what still, you know, during those 2 years you were up north in New York, you did have a chance, like you said, to work WrestleMania 5. You worked with Dino Bravo. You know, I wanted to, you also worked on some pretty high-profile cards back when we were talking about the Starcade. You worked with Flair at the one, and you worked with, you know, the Midnight Express at that one with the Street Fight, teaming with Jimmy Valiant. We were just wondering if you could compare, like, those types of event, working a Starcade, say, with the NWA or Crockett Promotions, their biggest event, as compared to working the WrestleMania that year at the Trump Plaza?
I don't know. I never, those things never really impressed me. What it was to me, it was dollar bills. You know, you wrestle in the big venue. I wrestle in smaller town and made just as much money. You wrestle on a card that you got 12 guys and you got 15,000 people. You made a lot of money because there was not. But if you wrestle with as a card, there's 30, 40 guys, and the expenses, you know, you're not making any more money. I'd rather sell out a place like Somerset, Kentucky, high school gym, and then going to New York, you draw 25,000 people. That's nothing if you compare the population. You have not accomplished a whole lot. You got 7 million people to work with. Where you go to a town that you got 5,000 people population and 2,000 are the wrestling match. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Good point.
To me, well, yeah. To me, that's you've done a whole lot more as far as drawing power than if you draw even if you draw 40,000 people. A population of 5 million. What is that? What is the percentage of that? You know?
Sure.
In the old days, we went to all the small towns. In the 60s, I remember in the early 70s, we'd go to these small towns. We made good money. In 1966 or 7, I was looking at a book not long ago. We made $25,000. Average folks made $5,000, $6,000. I was 20 years old. Well, my kid said to me, "So that's all you made?" I said, "Yeah." back then, $25,000 is like making $250,000 today. You know, and how many people are making $250,000? Some people are, but not the majority of people. So in the wrestling business, he was always making more. I never made millions, but it's all what you got at the end. You can make all the millions you want. And you got that in sports, and you got that in entertainment, and you got that. They made all these millions. At the end, they're broke. All for nothing.
Sure.
Right. I mean, that's the way I look at life. You know, all for nothing. You can brag about making it, but, you know. So that's what wrestling was about to me. The big shows I was not impressed. I was impressed with the pay. That's what impressed me. If I could get on a pay-per-view, you made a whole lot more money than you just got on one show in the house. You know. And that was the objective. And the pay-per-view was not, they didn't have that many pay-per-view. At the end of my career, they was coming on. You know, I think New York, when I went there, I think they had 4 a year, I think, if I remember right. Now they got a whole lot more pay-per-view.
Oh, for sure.
Am I right? I don't know. I don't follow it.
They,
I don't know.
They have one a month now.
Yeah, well, see, one a month. Well, you know, that's good money. That's big money, pay-per-view. Yeah. And it's like selling all the gimmicks that they sell. Well, it was just starting. You know, I still get a little bit of you know, what do you call it?
Residuals.
Yeah, residual. But you know, very little, because I quit when it was just starting. You know. So there's a whole lot more things today that these guys can make money with. Endorsement and everything. We started when I worked for Crockett. We did some endorsements. I got my name on the mellow yellow cans, and we did parties, grand openings, and some malls and stuff like that through Crockett Promotion. But I'm sure they do a whole lot more today.
Oh, I would say that's safe to say. So lastly, Ronnie, we wanted to talk. You had just kind of explained to us you got out of the business at about 45. You thought it was, you know, your time to hang it up when you were leaving up there in New York with the WWF. I remember you, like you said, there was an entertaining program that you spoke of with Greg Valentine where you did the referee bit and you did the ring announcer stuff. And like you said, you know, you had the match with the Royal Rumble and everything. And then I remember you started doing a program there with Rick Martel. I don't necessarily remember a match surfacing out of that, but if you don't mind going back to the end of your time up there in New York, you know, what was the final deciding factors, or what led up to you just ending your stay there, so to speak?
In New York?
Yeah.
Well, I knew I wouldn't have done any better, because, you know, there was too much going on. Like I say, and the promotion is more into this stuff that I can't do. You know, I'm not a guy like Hulk Hogan. You know, it's great. I mean, they can do it. I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't rock and roll. My interviews were so-so. I got by because I'm not a great speaker or talker or whatever. You know, but. To me, I started in wrestling when you did your talent showed in the ring. When the bell rang, that's when the show was on. Today they talk and they wrestle 5 minutes, you know, and I don't have that. I can wrestle 2 hours, but I can't talk 2 hours and be charismatic like some of those guys. You know what I'm saying? So wrestling had changed. And I'm used to the old school. I never had flamboyant jackets and going to the ring and with lights and flashing and explosions and smoke and, you know, and songs and music, you know. What in the world? You know, I told Vince, man, I can't sing, dance, or rock and roll. That's not me. I'm sorry. But I'll tell you what, when the bell rang, I entertained him for an hour. Easy.
Every time. I can recall that for sure. Like I said, one of the most believable, one of my favorites when I was watching when I was younger and stuff. All of your stuff was always very great. A lot to be said for that. And, you know, very respectful the way that you look at the business as far as when you thought it was your time and you didn't necessarily agree, so to speak, with the direction it was heading. There's a lot to be said for that. A lot of guys stick around maybe too long.
Yeah, well, things change. Life changes all the time, and I understand it. And I'm not knocking it. Vince is very successful. I'd be crazy to criticize that. I mean, it's changed, and it's not going to go back the way it was. And it's going to change again from what it is today. Down the road somewhere, it will change again. That's why a lot of promoters got left behind. They thought that he was going to go bankrupt. He was going to kill wrestling. They thought he was going to destroy the business. And what did he do? He took it over. They all went out of business. So Vince had a vision, and it worked. But I could not do what he wanted. He never told me that. I just could see it. To be successful up there, you have to be able to do different things than I was used to do. Because when I started in the 60s, we sold wrestling. We went in the ring and we didn't have 30-man cards. I wrestled in some of those cards. It was an 8-man card, and they still give them 2-hour show. Because guys could go in the ring and wrestle an hour, 45 minutes, or 90 minutes. You don't see that anymore. They would book matches 90 minutes and come back, no time limit. My longest match in wrestling was 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow.
And, 2 hours and 40 minutes. Well, it only happened one time, but I had a lot of matches of 90 minutes. A lot of matches. But today, they're all 20-minute, 30-minute match. I don't even know.
Yeah, not even that usually, to be honest.
I remember wrestling Ric Flair twice on a Sunday afternoon and a Sunday night into another town. Get in the airplane and go fly and wrestle at night. Wrestle an hour in the afternoon and an hour at night.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. And I mean, we wrestled. We didn't walk around and talk for 20 minutes. That's another thing too. They walk around, they're talking, they're stalling, they get on the floor, they get back in the ring, they get back on the floor, they're talking. I'm talking about wrestling, a contest. The only way people will believe is when you make them think that they're seeing a contest between two guys that are trying to beat each other, not walking around, and dancing like they lock up like two old douchebags like they're trying to dance or have a dance or something. To me, wrestling is a sport that you got to try to beat one another, not walking around. You see guys wrestle today, they body slam a guy. The guy is laying down. Think about this logically. You pick up a guy, it takes a lot of effort to pick up a guy and body slam him, right?
Sure.
And supposedly, why are you body slamming him? It's supposed to hurt. But after they body slam him, instead of covering him and trying to pin him, they pick him up. Does that make any sense?
I suppose not, no.
Doesn't make any sense. Every time a guy is laying on his back, what do? You try to pin him. That is the object of wrestling, submission or a pin. And anyway, the art of wrestling, I think, is gone. Now it's the art of entertainment through whatever I call it, mainly trampoline act.
Yeah. Well said.
You go out there, you do back front flips and somersaults and triples and whatever,
Right.
But hey.
Nothing like a good walking around somebody just stomping on their limbs. Nobody does that anymore.
That's right.
Well, I copied that,
Who'd you take that from?
See, nobody knows that. I've told a lot of people that everybody is surprised. But you see, in the old days, it was a no to copy somebody. You didn't get respect for that. You got a lot of heat and they copied somebody. But after they quit or they were gone, it was okay to copy. And I copied the great Malenko. The great Malenko. He did a little bit different, and he didn't call it anything, but he would walk around the guys stomping them. And that's who I copied. Yeah, and then when I was the one-man gang in Tennessee, the other guy came around because I sent what was his name, the big guy. Anyway, I got him booked for Bill Watts called them the one-man gang. But I was a one-man gang. But there was one before me, and it was Don Evans back in the 50s. He was the one-man gang. So it's funny how people just, different generations, they don't know, they don't remember, or. And I heard that somebody else did the stump. I don't know. That's what I had a wrestling fan told me that. I can't remember who it was now.
Yeah, I think you're referring to Randy Orton, who does that move right now. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Scum.
No, I'm pretty sure you're right. I think Randy Orton, I know you mentioned earlier you work with Bob, his father. I think Randy Orton does a variation of the stomp these days.
Well, it's great. It's a form of flattery, but yeah, everybody, you got to copy somebody. In show business they do, but usually they do it when the other person is not around. He's either dead or retired.
Sure.
So,
absolutely. Well,
and
again,
you can always change it, modify it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we always say, at least I always say, you learn something new here every week on WGD Weekly, and there you have it. I was certainly unaware. I don't think Steve was aware either that the Garvin stomp had come from the great Malenko, who you had mentioned earlier, working with earlier in your career. So staying true to form, you do learn something new here every week on WGD Weekly. And we really want to thank you for taking this time out of your evening here, Ronnie, to join us. The Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin on WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Steve, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to tell Ronnie Garvin while I still had him on the line. I grew up watching wrestling, first got into it with my grandfather. I know we've talked about it a couple of times on the show in the past. Same with the Scum here, just kind of growing up, watching our old man's watching wrestling and getting a kick out of it. And, of course, you start following suit. And your performance in WWF specifically, he loved you. That Garvin stomp, he'd get up out of his chair and go nuts laughing his tail off. But I'll tell you this, that probably one of my earliest memories of sitting down watching wrestling with him was that program with Jake Roberts. Some really, really good stuff there. And I know that watching wrestling with him was something really special, and he really got a kick out of your work, man.
Sure.
I've gone on record on the show as well numerous times saying, and you spoke to it, as did Jake Roberts when he was on the show, that program that you had said, and when you were saying that, the talent of Jake and that you didn't know what was coming next, I've gone on record numerous times as saying that may be my favorite, program or feud or whatever you call it of all time. So it was a real honor to have you here with us. I know Steve, like he was just explaining from our younger days, definitely one of our favorites of all time, and it was a real thrill to have you on the show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure being on. I enjoyed it too. It's good to talk about the old days.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's why the WGD stands for Wrestling's Glory Days. That's all we talk about here. So
well, great. Good luck with your program, and big hi to the wrestling fans. And if it would have been for the fans, I wouldn't have had much of a job.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. You have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Dan Murphy, senior writer of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, here on WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum.
Okay, Scum Nation, we are back. Ronnie Garvin with a lot of interesting things to say. And Scum, I'm going to ask you what you thought of the interview, and when you answer me, try not to be a douchebag.
I was funny that you would bring that up. I was thinking about changing my gimmick from the Scum to the douchebag, and I was so WGD Weekly with Steve and the douchebag. And when if we did have video clips, you would see that I would be dressed as a human pear. in black and yellow polka dots.
Come on, man. That's too much, dude. Ronnie Garvin was great. A lot of good stuff there, man.
Absolutely. Very interesting to hear his take on a lot of stuff. One thing that I was very curious to hear was when he was NWA World Champion and they didn't have him defending the title there. I always thought as a fan then, and I know a lot of people have said over the years, and everybody's an armchair booker, let's say, these days, even whether they even were watching the event at the time or even paying attention or alive for that matter. A lot of people say, why was Ronnie Garvin the world champion? Personally, as someone who grew up watching him on the Superstation and things, I thought it was great when they made Ronnie Garvin the champion, but then I didn't understand why he didn't fight again until the rematch. I mean, you had guys like Tully Blanchard, like Arn Anderson, I mean, tons of great heels back in the Jim Crockett promotion days that never had a chance because Flair was always the man and he might lose the title to the good guy and then win it back a couple weeks later, and no one else really worked that program. So interesting to hear Ronnie give his take on that.
Yeah, he also had a lot of interesting, at least he was leaning towards some interesting things to say about Dusty Rhodes. There's clearly some bad blood there, and he really kind of blames that whole thing on him, man. It seemed to me like Dusty didn't want him to do anything. He just wanted him to win the title for the big pop there and then just lose it again, and didn't want him to really do anything, which was just kind of odd. Anytime you put that big of and prestigious of a belt on someone, you'd figure even if you had like one of those interim runs with like a, and maybe he was there, maybe he wasn't, but a guy like, Kamala or something, just like a monster heel, just to keep, something interesting until Flair comes back and wins the title again. You knew it was inevitable, but it was also kind of surprising that he won, man.
Oh, yeah. I definitely remember being shocked when Garvin won the title. It was fantastic. I thought, again, I was not that old at the time, and I was a fan of his, so I thought that it was pretty cool that a veteran like that got the title. And, it was interesting to hear. I also thought when you were saying that he hinted toward the bad blood with Dusty, or maybe not so subtly hinted that I believe he was referring to him as the Fat Man when he went up and got the WWF gimmick with Sweet Sapphire up there. But I thought it was interesting how, he thought Rhodes wanted to kill off the, in essence, from what he was saying, he was a businessman first and foremost, kill off the cash flow that was coming in and the money that he was making as a good guy, so he turned him bad. He had that knockout punch where he took the money, knocked out Dusty Rhodes, and then when they were supposed to work the program, Garvin left the company. So all that the people on TV, all that the fans watching at home got to see was Garvin one-punch Rhodes, knock him out, and then he was in the WWF a couple. I think actually AWA he went at that point, but regardless, he definitely wasn't on TBS.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like you mentioned earlier, man, I think his best work was probably with Jake the Snake. And, a lot of people have mixed opinions on his run in the WWF. Matter of factly, I thought it was all right. And, again, we always talk about where our origins come from when we started watching wrestling and with whom. And, my grandfather loved Ronnie Garvin. Loved that guy. And loved the Garvin Stomp. Now, a lot of people think that move was quite ridiculous, and given the situation in like some sort of a realistic setting, no one is ever doing the Garvin Stomp. Let's just come to realization right now. But it was funny as hell to him. He was laughing his ass off. So, it kind of rubbed off on me. So I always thought it was an entertaining move. What did you think about the Garvin Stomp?
Hey, it worked. It was something that was synonymous with him. Again, like you said, it's not necessarily the most believable move. But then again, I mean, when's the last time you saw somebody in like hand-to-hand combat, not on television, give someone a pile driver or a power bomb or any submission hold ever?
Well, nowadays, I mean, if you look at it from like an MMA standpoint, which it's kind of hard not to, I mean, submissions, suplexes, even the random DDT or a clothesline or some sort of body slam. I mean, those are all like perceivable things that could happen within the confines of a real fight. But yeah, like a pile driver, that's pretty tough to deal with when you're really fighting. But yeah, right, the Garvin Stomp.
Nobody's laying there and stepping through one leg and turning them over or stopping, screaming woo, and then falling back into a submission hold. For that, like if somebody gets a DDT where they got a front face lock and they fall on them, I mean, they're not stopping, putting their hand to their ear, twirling their finger in the air, pointing at a bag in the corner, and then dropping them with a DDT.
If you do that, you have owned that person you're fighting.
Right.
Officially
maybe if, like, first you, like,
ass.
stabbed them. Even the suplexes. I mean, when I'm saying like a suplex, I'm pretty sure on any mixed martial arts that nobody's ever picked someone up vertically, held them in the air for a count of like 10, and then dropped them backwards like the Bulldog or somebody used to do.
Right, like marched around the ring with them.
Right, or like the classic Benoit, like repeated like 8 German suplexes in a row.
I'll be honest with you, whoever came up with that concept is a genius, because there's several people that do that with, different style of chain wrestling where they repeat the same style suplex 3-4 times in a row. Classic stuff there. I'd like to see someone do like 3 pile drivers.
Absolutely. Like
continuous pile drivers all over the ring.
Yeah. My vote for that would be Orndorff.
Yes, Orndorff, or even maybe a Haku. And the reason why I mentioned Haku is because it's Royal Rumble week. And Haku executed, I think it was in the 92 Rumble, Scum. Or it might have been the 91 Rumble. I'm not quite sure. But he executes, like in the middle of the melee, there's like 12 people battling in the ring, and somewhere in there, he finds a way to get off a pile driver.
Yeah, love it. Maybe the most random pile driver ever delivered. Like 10 bodies, arms flying everywhere, and the camera pans, and there's Haku spiking somebody with a textbook pile driver. Love it.
I think it was the British Bulldog, but I may be confused with another. There was actually another pile driver in another Royal Rumble, and your boy Bret Hart, who's one of my guys too. I love Bret Hart, but I know you're a huge Bret Hart fan. He actually executes a pile driver in the Royal Rumble under the same conditions.
Yeah, well, Bret gave a great pile driver. People don't remember that because in the later years, the pile driver was kind of somewhat outlawed, I suppose. I mean, I don't know if it was actually outlawed, but just because of injuries and the danger of it, I don't think it was used that much. But Bret, when they first tried breaking him free from the Hart Foundation, when that WrestleMania 4 Battle Royal, when him and Bad News teamed up and got rid of the Junkyard Dog, and then Bad News turned on, tricked Bret, threw him out, and Bret destroyed the trophy and everything. When he had that singles run initially, I believe that was 1988, he used the pile driver. He didn't have the sharpshooter until a good 2 or 3 years later. So Bret Hart's finisher at one point was a vicious pile driver.
Yes. Prior to the, I'm thinking the Texas Cloverleaf, but prior to the sharpshooter, yeah, he did have that vicious pile driver, and everything he did was very crisp, and pile driver included. So, Bret Hart, obviously, any move that he's going to do to you, it looked good, and you were safe too. He always prided himself in keeping people safe. If I could jump in here
for a second and agree with that, if you're listening right now, and in any stretch of the imagination you're thinking of a comment that you could insert after saying the crispness of Bret's move, and you're looking to throw the term 4 out of 10 in there, turn your fucking computer off right now and stop listening. You're listening to the wrong show if that's what you were thinking about Bret Hart. All right, continue, please.
Absolutely. Well, we always talk about it at the top of the show. We want to dedicate our time to the glory days of professional wrestling. Our Facebook page, Wrestling's Glory Days, that's what we're all about there. So that's kind of where the Scum's coming from. And I agree, too. The newer product, people want to watch it. I watch it from time to time. And I'll be honest with you, Scum, this is the time of the year where I do kind of get excited to watch what's going on in wrestling because of the Royal Rumble itself. Watching the match, I watch it every year, and it always is a great build-up to the Royal Rumble. And I may as well ask you, I mean, we're on the subject, who's winning this year?
This year's Rumble?
Yeah.
It seems like I take with a grain of salt with you read all the different things. If you bought into the predictions and the quote unquote insider scoops, there's about 9 different guys going to win it. But I would think logically I could see Batista winning it, coming back and coming out and demanding the title shot. But personally, I think that it would be just a complete shame if after the reactions that he's got and the way that things have played out since SummerSlam with the whole authority angle, I would think Daniel Bryan should win it and go on and have his WrestleMania moment and be the champion. Again, I could be wrong. I don't know. It just seem that it would make everything that's happened with him make sense. And we talked about this recently. That night that he was in the cage match and he was teamed with Bray Wyatt and he was a short-lived member of the Wyatt family, when he tore that suit off and that crowd, when he was sitting on top of the cage, if that doesn't scream, here's your guy to have his moment in WrestleMania, the reaction he got that night, that I'm not really sure exactly what anyone is watching that has the control button, so to speak, on WWE programming.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's been a 2-year progression with him. You remember the day after the Raw, the night after WrestleMania, where Sheamus beat him in like 18 seconds for the World Championship. The next night, even though he lost, dude, there were people all over the crowd screaming yes, and they had the little 8 by 10 cards or whatever with the words yes on it. Ever since then, his stock has been growing and growing, and you're absolutely right. He had people eating out of his hand. He's definitely the most well-received guy they have right now. Without even following the product very closely, you could see from the fans' perspective. Now, they may have other ideas and other plans for other people, like you said, like Batista. But I totally agree with you, Scum. If he doesn't win the Royal Rumble, I would be very, very surprised. But again, you never know, and that's why you watch. And you never know who the competitors are. And if you look back over the years, man, going back to what we're here for, and that's the Glory Days Classic Wrestling. Over the years of all the different Royal Rumble, Scum, who were some of the biggest surprises that you were like, no way, when you saw this guy come through the curtain?
Well, there's been a lot of surprises, but I think there's also been some where it just didn't look right. Like some of the guys that were in there just looked, an era gone by, and then they were out there. A couple of those that immediately come to mind is 1995, a man who gets mentioned top to bottom every show of WGD Weekly. Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch was in there in 95. And I remember when I saw that and he came out, it almost looked like he was like superimposed, like he didn't look any different than he looked in, say, 81. And he's out there, and you can imagine who he's in there. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head who he was mixing it up with, but in 95, you're looking at guys that were, Diesel. I think Luger was still around. Tatanka, the British Bulldog, guys like this. It was great to see him out there. And then I believe the following year in 96 or maybe 97, we saw Dory Funk Jr. in there. And another just surreal moment with a legendary figure that just did not seem, in 97 I know it was because it was San Antonio, is Mil Mascaras climbing to the top rope and diving with a cross-body block on someone on the floor and eliminating himself, almost as though he had no idea what the rules were.
I totally remember that. And I was actually going to say, if you didn't mention it, I was going to mention, what about Mil Mascaras? That's hilarious.
Well, there was that great one with Honky Tonk Man after Kane had, the year Kane set the record and cleared 1 million people out of there. I think it was 01. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it was who's next? Who's next? I think that was when Drew Carey came out, and the WWE Hall of Famer Drew Carey, come on down. He came out, and then there's the ring is empty, and all of a sudden Honky's music hits. He comes out, does his whole "I'm gonna sing for you, I know what you came here to see the Honky Tonk Man dance," and Kane just splintered the guitar over his head and threw him out. That was a great moment because I didn't know he was coming out then. I was actually at a Rumble in 2000 in Madison Square Garden where Bob Backlund came out and actually got a pretty warm reception from Madison Square Garden.
Well, he should. He sold the place out for about 6 straight years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Scum, in line with the Royal Rumble, I see that you've been hard at work this week with the Glory Days, the WGD Royal Rumble. Tell us a little bit about what's going on here, who the competitors are, and where we stand.
Well, where we stand as of this recording a couple of days early, as of airing, you'll still have some time here on Sunday to get your final votes in for the winner, and we will be down to the last 2 competitors, and Monday morning the winner of the inaugural WGD Rumble will be named the prestigious champion of the WGD Rumble, if you will. So what we started out with was a random blind draw with 20 competitors that have appeared on WGD Weekly, and the fans at Wrestling's Glory Days and WGD Weekly on Facebook have voted for 3 competitors each. It started with 10 men, and it was whittled down, and then the next 5 were announced the following day. And the first day that went through, out of the initial guys that were entered, Jake the Snake Roberts and Lex Luger came in 1 and 2. Both of them lived on to the next day. Road Warrior Animal lived on to the next day. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, moved on, and our guest tonight, Ronnie Garvin, made it into the second day of the WGD Rumble. So then when 11 through 15 came out, only one man different than the first 5 played through, as DiBiase, the Snake, Animal, and Luger each went through, except Kevin Von Erich took the place of our friend from tonight, Ronnie Garvin, which, I'm not sure if he's keeping track, but I'm sure if he was, he wouldn't mind me saying that I don't quite understand how all these douchebags didn't vote for him. but regardless of that, so now the final 10 in the ring is going to be whittled down to the final 4 before we have our last 2 competitors. The final 10 in, numbers 15 through 20, included Diamond Dallas Page, Tully Blanchard, Kevin Sullivan, the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff, and Ken Shamrock. And then the 5 that survived, Jake the Snake, Luger, DiBiase, Road Warrior Animal, and Kevin Von Erich. So 4 of those guys will move on to the final 4, then down to 2, and then there will be a winner crowned Monday morning.
That's fantastic, Scum. And guys, we're in an age where you could probably hop on WWE 14 and recreate that. If someone's that psyched to recreate this Rumble and even do it and record it and do it in line with the Scum's posts on Glory Days, that'd be awesome. Or if you just did it and ran a simulation just to see who would win out of those guys if you created them all, that would be fantastic. And if you send that into us, we will send you a prize. We got some good stuff here in the vault at WGD Weekly Studios. Scum, that sounds great. The WGD Rumble in full swing. We're going to have an answer tomorrow. Super Bowl Sunday next week, Scum. Who do we have here on our show?
Well, Steve, next week will be a Super Bowl-like episode, as we're going to be welcoming another WWE Hall of Famer, a guy who was no stranger to tonight's guest in some brutal battles. Original member of the Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard, will be with us next week, Steve, next Sunday.
That's awesome. And I'll tell you that maybe we should not say Super Bowl because I don't think we have the right to actually say those words. So the big game that people play, and there's 11 on 11, and there's a football, and there are people that go there and watch it, is next week.
The large football contest with commercials.
Yes. The commercial show where they sprinkle in a little bit of competitive professional football.
Unfortunately, there will not be halftime heat this year.
No, but there will be red hot chili peppers, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd rather have Foley in the Rock in that empty arena with McMahon as the commentator, standing as Foley stood in front of him in the classic. Well, hilarious. I mean, maybe not their best match, but definitely served its purpose. And McMahon doing the one-man commentary as Foley in front of him stands in front of him and look at Mankind. He's disgusting.
He's disgusting. Great stuff, man. Tully Blanchard next week. Lots going on at Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Thanks so much again for tuning in. It's been a pretty interesting show. A little lively action from Steve and the Scum and a great interview from Ronnie Garvin. And again, a rare one like the Scum was saying. So thanks again for listening. Tully Blanchard next week, Scum. I got my flannel. I got my jeans. I got my cowboy boots. And I'm ready to go fight someone for a duffel bag full of ones.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's going to be Steve and the Scum and Tully in the WGD studios, hanging above our heads in the studio, above the microphones where we sit and interview our guests. There will be a old champion gym bag, and there will be $37.18, half a pack of Marlboro Reds, and not a full 6-pack of cans, but 4 or 5 Budweisers with the old plastic wrap 6-pack container. And I'll tell you one thing, I will not say I quit because I'm out of smokes.
There you have it, folks, and that again is why they call him the Scum. My name is Steve. Thanks once again for listening. We got Tully Blanchard next week. We'll see you then.
See you next week. Try and not be a douchebag.